Now, the message to the Nigerian authorities was clear this week. The bold reforms of fuel and FX are good, but yet to deliver benefits to the ordinary Nigerians. The Nigerian Economic Summit held in Abuja earlier in the week, and the latest World Bank Nigeria Development Update asked the government to take further and immediate policy reform steps in order to deliver real value of national economic management. Discussing this and more with me tonight on the show is Professor Ken Ife. He's a development economist and a public policy analyst. A very warm welcome to you, Professor, and thank you for making the time to be in our Abuja studios tonight to discuss this. Let's hit the ground running, as the saying goes. What would you consider, Professor, as the central message of the NESG summit? You were there, and of course you sat on a session.
Yeah, very interesting. Actually, I quite like the format of this year's event, and it was so well organized, and very good points were raised, and very well attended as well. And I spoke there on the third day. They pointed at all the gains, macroeconomic gains of the country, just as was amplified by the message from World Bank report. We've seen stability in the foreign exchange market, in the monetary policy as a tighter grip, and then at least they are now beginning to come down on monetary policy rates to respond to incentivizing more growth. And we've seen growth in our economy, 4.2% growth. And then we've also seen a positive balance of payment. We are now beginning to record about 6.1% current account surplus. And even the debt-to-deficit ratio did now come down to below 3%. It's about 2.6. So all the indices, macroeconomic indices, are actually coming down, and that is very, very positive. But the central worry for them, all through the seminar, all the workshop, and of course from the central bank as well, is that it's not trickling down. It's not. They are not. The entire citizens want to feel something. It's not improving the living standards. It's not taking people out of poverty as much as we would work. So the answer is, or the summary of it is that, yes, all this macroeconomic stability are necessary, but not sufficient condition to bring down our poverty levels or to improve the standard of living. And I weighed in on this particular subject matter during the event on Wednesday morning.
We'll get a little bit to how you weighed in during your session, but the NESG's Macroeconomic Condition Index shows that the fiscal position highlight deep structural weaknesses in public finance in Nigeria. Do you agree?
Actually, I quite like the macroeconomic, the econometrics. I quite like that report.
Index, yes.
Because it's beginning to try to make sense of a diverse range of macroeconomic parameters. But I need to interrogate that over time when I get the full report. But it's very interesting to make a sense of this and see how you can use multivariate analysis to predict some of these before they crystallize. So it was a very good one.
So do you agree that...
And I do agree with that.
Do you agree that we have deep structural weaknesses in Nigeria's public finance?
Yeah, that's the one I always talk about. Honestly, that's the one that really, gets my body temperatures up, because one, we have what I call, I wouldn't use the word oppressive. But it's a dominant. Our fiscal policy is so dominant, and over monetary policy, over trade policy, over industrial policy, and even employment policy. So if we are going to look at the agenda that I painted the other day, is to say, look at the opportunity that we have in Nigeria. We have an opportunity of Africa continental free trade. Yes. We also have the opportunity that Donald Trump has handed us another economic independence. So we are all saying, okay, Nigerian first, Nigerian first. And the president has gone the extra mile to put out 30% value addition. Now, because he has done this, the question is, what are we going to do to ensure that we can deliver this 30% value addition, which is a minimum. So the focus should be on industrialization. But that industrialization has to be on the back of an export-led strategy. That is where it's because export-led growth strategy has actually removed over 400 million people from poverty in China. All the Asian tiger economies benefited from an export-led strategy. And Nigeria has to focus on this. Because when you look at trade in goods and trade in services, we don't have problem with trade in services. The banks are doing well. They're all over Africa. The ICT and digital economy are doing well. They're on their own. You haven't been giving them any support that much, except the skills agenda we want to address now. But then the creative and cultural industry, they're on their own. They're doing well. Education and health will also benefit for better regulation and then all kinds of to make sure that we exploit the bilateral. So that's fine. But where we have problem is trading goods. We have got nothing to trade in goods. Where are the products you are going to trade in Africa? Are you going to send them your raw materials to African countries? So we need to face this square. And the reason we are failing with everything that is said about diversification, there's a momentum for diversification in the domestic economy, but not on the export side. That's why NNPC and their crude is giving us 79% of forex, gas giving 11%, that's 90% between the two of them, and we only have 10% to play with for diaspora remittance, for our minor oil export. We need to tackle industrialization. And the way to tackle it is to bring fiscal policy, monetary policy, trade, industrial employment to focus on industrialization policy in a way that we haven't seen before.
But when we talk about...
And the central question you are going to ask, you've already asked this question.
Yes.
The central question is this: where is the borrowing going to? What is the where are the industrial infrastructure that are required to drive industrialization?
Is that what the fiscal
government
reform
should focus on using their
what the fiscal reform should
government
address?
should focus on using internal revenue. No, let me explain something. Government should focus on using internally generated revenue to do the things that, if you do want to do project that leads to no man's land, do that. Use that to do it. If you want to pay conditional capital, use your money. You got 36 trillion, use it. But if you are going to borrow money, we want you to show how what you are borrowing, the infrastructure, how is it going to connect to industrialization policy? Because if you look at the law, this fiscal law 2007, yes, it says I want cost-benefit analysis on anything you want to borrow. And it says long-term, it says concessionary rates, it says all sorts of things. But when the law begins to ask you for cost-benefit analysis, it wants you to have a discussion on economic corridor, industrial corridor, commercial corridor, residential corridor, when you're doing infrastructure. And the infrastructure related to industrialization is free trade zones, EPZ, industrial parks, all of that, even in agriculture, quality infrastructure. So there are specific infrastructure that focus on industrialization. Put money there. And of course, your human resource development. We are doing something on ICT, but do more on human resource development and infrastructure that are connected to industrialization. That's where we're going to move. Because you have an import-dependent economy. You are exporting your raw material, which is exporting jobs, and you are importing poverty. So you've got to tackle that. That is weird. And even when I look at World Bank report, it didn't deal with that.
Yes. So when we talk about deep structural weaknesses, we need to connect fiscal policies to industrialization, to exports. Where is the disconnect?
Correct. The disconnect is this. We haven't actually tackled the issue that import dependency is our problem. So you hear people saying, backward integration, import substitution, but you don't say this in isolation. You have to have an orchestrated policy, which we're going to first of all revise, get a trade policy. We're going to get industrial policy before we come to export growth strategy, export-led growth strategy, where you are going to focus on industrialization. And industrialization, you are going to focus on this. All the policies, macroeconomic policies, must talk to this industrialization program. All of them must talk to it. And not one saying that I'm no longer going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Okay, look, you see incentives, where most of the incentives that was given, waivers and all of that, to a point, it was almost half of government revenue. So we've got to focus, and the tax reform has actually addressed some of that now. But you have to focus on industrialization from the point of view of removing our import dependence. It's the import dependence that is causing the biggest problem for jobs. That's what is causing the poverty. The poverty is continuing to intensify because you can have growth. Even the fact that you borrow money as a government and spend it is still going to promote growth because you are increasing government spending. There are four indices that there's four pillars of GDP. You have the household consumption, almost 70 to 80%. You have government consumption, just under 10%.
Yes.
So if you borrow money and spend it, if you print money and spend it, you still have inflation, but you also have growth. And then you have investment, which is a problem for us. So all of this, you'll be getting that growth, paper growth, but it's not affecting our food. It's not affecting the standard of living. So we have to focus on industrialization because that is where, and if it is export facing, that's where it would have a backward effect on all of the other forces of production. Solid mineral will come up for beneficiation. Agriculture will go for agro-processing. Then you have a marine economy coming up so that our fisheries and all of that will give us revenue. And then the oil that you are talking about, I hear non-oil. What is non-oil? Oil and oil. Texas has 32 refineries and 5,000 petrochemical industries, all producing and exporting. And you are telling me about how many? You've all the ones we have with NPCs are dead. And then the only Dangote that brought 20 billion, they want to kill the company. So we just have to face this so that all policies must point towards industrialization. That is when we now realize employment that we have been exporting.
So I love that. But if you look at some of the data, third quarter GDP, trade surplus, inflation, a little bit lower, stable and stronger exchange rates. And then you've got the central bank at the last monetary policy did a symbolic interest rate cut. So do you think these are enough to drive the economy faster, stronger, quicker, to take the policies home to the dining table?
You see, if you don't focus on industrialization and reduce our import dependence, it will be difficult to get the $1 trillion economy you are looking for. These policies you've mentioned, they are very interesting. They are very necessary because they are giving us some form of growth, but they are not giving the employment. The services sectors will not give you the employment you are looking for. Is the service going to produce food? Is the telephone call going to give you food? Or is it the banking that will give you food? The banks are not giving their money to the smallholder farmers who are growing the food. So there's a big disconnect between what you do in trading services, all of the area of health, education, banking, all that, trading services. They're fantastic. They give you, they don't put the food on the table. They don't. You have to turn to good in services, trading in goods. What are you producing? And we have nothing to sell. Is it that we sold some beans and don't? No, we haven't got, and you have to produce, and the law says don't send anything out unless it's minimum of 30% value addition. So it's a wake-up call for everybody to say, okay, let's face this. All policies must talk to this. And then if we are borrowing, show me how that borrowing is going to connect to industrial growth and industrial policy. So it's just as simple as that. Because you need a quantum leap on our growth to be able to meet the kind of target you are pointing at, and for you to actually turn and lift people out of poverty, and then produce enough food for this country to eat.
So, Professor, the World Bank latest development update released on Wednesday delivered a very thought-provoking message asking the government to take the reform gains home. What's your take on that in terms of bringing the policy from policy to people? So does it mean that we have not been able to put the private sector on the driver's seat, whatever we've been doing so far? Does that mean that the two bold reforms which the government talked about, the fuel and foreign exchange subsidies, cut out or reforms, are beginning to weak and we not stepping up with reinforcing policies and reforms as quickly as possible?
I love the World Bank conclusions. I really doff my hat. They went for three things. One is that they said tackle food inflation, food insecurity, food inflation, which we all know Because the previous, in first quarter, we were even doing 0.07%. Now there's an increase, but it was pathetic compared to our population and the urbanization rates, 3% and 4.6%. But the second one is that we have to improve the efficiency of public borrowing and public spending. That is where I'm coming from when I was talking about the faithful implementation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act and making sure that you are borrowing to the requirement and then targeting the industrialization program, wherever. Then the third one is very interesting, actually, because I've always opposed one element of the social protection program. I'm saying don't borrow money to do social protection program. Use your own money. Use your 36 trillion you've made the target last month, 2 months ago. Use that money. You and share that. So use that to do the infrastructure that can lead to nowhere.
You don't agree that the World Bank should give us money, that the World Bank should not give Nigeria money in dollar terms, turn it into naira,
no,
and
World
share
Bank
it.
should give us their grant.
Yes.
Boson. World Bank should give us their grant and we can share that. Government can share that. They have grants. Let them give us the grant. This is because if you look at the FRA 2007, it says any lending outside this framework, it was warning development finance institution, any lending outside this framework is unlawful. He said that. It's in there. So I keep on encouraging them, give us grant and we can share those. That's what it is for. But don't tell me to go and borrow the money and then you go and use it for revenue, revenue expenditure, recurrent expenditure, and paying for them. No, that's not what the borrowing is for. The borrowing is for projects that can demonstrate cost benefit. So it has to go to infrastructure and productive capacity. And then in infrastructure is not anything called infrastructure. It has to be infrastructure that has economic impact. That's why I was interpreting what that law means. It says whenever you are going to do that, for you to do cost benefit analysis, where is the benefit? The benefit has to be if the infrastructure connects economic corridors, industrial corridors, commercial corridors, residential corridors, so that they will be used and they will be able to generate revenue to maintain the infrastructure.
So
and industrialization is the key one.
The government talks
I'm
about
not against having.
Yes, the government talks about infrastructure and industrialization, so there's a coastal highway, the rail lines being talked about and all that. So aren't we building this infrastructure for industrialization? Isn't that what you're seeing right now on the table?
I'm sure we could do better. We could do better because, I brought one man from China who owns 68 mega industrial park in January 2020. And he was interested in doing 10 of those with $1 billion each, in dollar in each, to bring down some of those Chinese companies, occupants who were folding up. But COVID stopped the process. But anyway, we're still going back to it. It is in industrialization. If you go to UK, throughout the time I was in UK, we have industrial landlords. They consider themselves social enterprises. Government gives asset. Any government build or use building or whatever, they give it to them, industrial property. So they have hundreds and hundreds of industrial parks, industrial property. Here we have 35 free trade zones, nothing in them except Lekki and a little thing in Calabar. And all that. You should give, if they are building houses, why don't you have industrial landlords who would build these industrial assets in the free trade zones and people will come? They don't tell them to get a free trade zone, you just sit down, waiting for people to bring their money. Develop those, and people will go in there to produce. Do you think Dangote will give you 20 billion naira in somewhere, anywhere? If it is not in the free trade zone, he won't put that kind of money. Because there's protection, and then you will also see the way it will attract people. And I have also said many times on your program, let us go and bring 50,000, do a $50 billion program around Dangote in Lekki and get young people and all these other ecosystem to work with him so that they can export, produce and export all the byproducts from his refineries. That's how you create. That is conscious. You have to consciously invest in infrastructure, in industrial infrastructure.
Yes,
and then have the policy framework converge. They should converge.
Yeah, $20 billion Dangote refinery, 50 billion industrial parks, special economic zones. I love that. What about the SMEs? And let us chat to that very briefly before we end the conversation in terms of how we can create jobs. Because now we're still talking about the fact that there are no jobs, disposable income is weak. We have 45 million SMEs in Nigeria. How much can we catalyze? Can we squeeze the SMEs to give us more jobs? Professor.
What I said Yeah, what I said about the SME at the event is that you have 42 million MSMEs in Nigeria, out of 90 million in Africa. So we are punching at 48% of entrepreneurship in Africa compared to our population, which is 15%, and our GDP, which is about 16-17%. So entrepreneurship is the major competitive advantage for Nigeria. The banks are not giving them resources. They only give to traders. The issue is this: if you want to create employment, turn around, stop this whole process of building thousands and hundreds of thousands of schools, build skills. Say to them, what do you need from me to support you to create one job, one company, one job, and then pilot with 1 million or pilot with even 100,000 companies. I know some companies can do 10, Dangote does over 100,000 people, train them and then give them jobs. But the thing is that do that so that they will take in, even if you have to give them 50,000 naira to train apprentices, whatever, for 6 months or 1 year, and then bring some money for their empowerment. And they can buy the tools that they require, but somebody has helped them. You could create 42 million jobs. By the next 5 years, you create those jobs. And not get money and send people to go and clean gutter, and they think they'll get a job from there. I mean, we have to use the company because that is where the skills are. The skills are domiciled with the private sector because the skills gap, what you have, the mismatch is that the education system is training people whose skills do not match the requirement of the labor market. So, you know, unashamedly get people because they will pick one or two. All these people on the street will disappear. If government is going to incentivize the 42 million to help take them, they will take them. You won't see anybody on the street.
Yes, the MSMEs.
Because there's something that you can do.
All right, Professor.
The MSMEs is correct.
Yes.
We're not using the MSMEs.
Yes. So one job per one MSME, that will give us at least 45 million jobs. Very simple mathematics or arithmetic.
Absolutely. But it's pilot the first year with 1 million or even 100,000 MSME. In Lagos alone, you will get 100,000 MSME that will take 100,000 people off the street. And in 6 months, they will start selling something, doing something productive. And if you can focus on industrialization, bring them in, you deal with your skills agenda. You will also deal with access to finance. You will deal with access to skills. You will ramp and then get the policies. Macroeconomic policies must all point to industrialization to tell us what they're going to do, and not to be, okay. Look, see how 2 million jobs have disappeared from textile industry, and you have industrial graveyards in Kanu, Lagos, and Kaduna. 3 million. Why? Those 2 million jobs because fiscal policy allowed frivolous imports from China. All these textile things destroyed and decimated, and we're having the same in petroleum, importing substandard fuel, and then those who want to put their money in increasing the capacity, they want to destroy them.
So thank you so much, Professor Kenny. We appreciate it's a Thank God Friday evening. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time on the program. As always, we appreciate those insights. Thank you so much. Have a great evening out of Abuja studios.